There's been a growing awareness of the tick-borne Lyme disease, particularly here on the Eastern Shore. If you're listening to Delmarva Today, this is Don Rush. But beyond the growing statistics, there are the personal struggles with a disease that can strike without warning. There's a new novel entitled Lyme Wars, a love story, which captures the devastating impact on one particular family. And its author, our former program director, Pam Andrews, is in the studio to talk about it. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me, Don.
It's calling for you. How can you bleed when I'm the one that's hurt?
The Sanctuary. Francesca walked from the parking lot toward the old historic church, which loomed over the rural landscape near the edge of town. Its massive brick facade gave a foreboding appearance. The air was crystalline and cool on this late afternoon in November. The chill of autumn settled in as daylight was vanishing over the horizon. In the distance, a brilliant sunset transformed the sky with shades of deep red, which reflected on the western facade of the church. Tall walls of brick and dark wooden doors were not welcoming, but imposing. Like many others across Delmarva, Francesca was looking for new ways to treat Lyme disease. Francesca pushed open a heavy wooden door on the south side of the church, which led to a small vestibule, just beyond the back pews of the sanctuary. In dim light, she could see the herbalist sitting at a small table surrounded by jars of healing balms used to treat tick-borne diseases. Pungent fragrances of clove, cinnamon, and oregano perfumed the air. Other clients gathered herbs, then left the building. Francesca was the last client. She thoughtfully gathered what she needed, then bade farewell to the herbalist, who packed up her wares and left. With a growing sense of curiosity, Francesca stepped into the spacious, elegant sanctuary. As the crimson glow from the setting sun vanished into twilight, candlelight gave this immense space an air of mystery and romance. Mahogany pews blended with dark oak floors. Aisles were carpeted in rich crimson. Tall, stained-glass windows depicted biblical scenes in hues of emerald green, sapphire blue, bronze, dark purple, and ruby red. The serenity of this setting drew Francesca into the heart of the sanctuary. Faintly at first, then more perceptibly, she heard the sumptuous voice of the church's soprano soloist, coming from the choir rehearsal room. She moved toward the sanctuary's northern aisle, where music echoed on stone floors and reverberated down long hallways. Francesca recognized the aria as Song to the Moon. Transfixed by the beauty of the music, she stood for a while, listening to the romantic, poignant song. Francesca turned back toward the altar to exit through the front doors, which were closer to the parking lot. Then she saw him, walking down the far side aisle. His expression, welcoming at first, changed to a malevolent, murderous gaze, his lips twisted into a mocking sneer of disdain and hatred. His eyes narrowed and hardened, turning from gray to black like burning coals. Panic filled her soul, and she frantically glanced around the sanctuary for a safe exit through the front door. Could she make it to the center aisle before he grabbed her? His face had the look of a wild animal about to attack, charging toward her. Her panic increased as unbearable tension made her whole body vibrate with fear. Her gaze locked in his. As she ran, her survival instincts kicked in, and she willed her body to turn into the center aisle, trying not to fall into the wooden pews as she ran. Francesca looked away from him, not wanting to know how close she was to her demise. She reached out to the divine. Eternal Father, lift me to your waiting arms. She was running as fast as she could toward the large front doors of the sanctuary. Almost there, almost there. She reached out her hand for the door. Francesca recoiled in horror as his hands grabbed her, his palms hot against her neck, his fingers like hooks digging into her flesh. His hand moved to her shoulder and spun her around to face him. She looked directly into his eyes and saw the depth of his insanity. She took a breath and screamed as loud as she could. Again and again she screamed. She struggled with every bit of strength she possessed to fight him off, hitting him, kicking him, her arms flailing. But he held her tight, pressing his hands ever more into her throat, his greater size and strength overpowering her efforts to free herself. She was losing her breath, grasping for air, unable to breathe. Running footsteps echoing from the hallway sounded distant as Francesca struggled to remain conscious. When resounding footsteps grew closer and louder, his hands released her neck and grabbed her torso. She felt her body rising from the floor as his unimaginable strength lifted her high into the air in his effort to push her aside as he fled. Her whole body became airborne, then crashed down, landing at awkward angles on the mahogany pews, her head and torso hit with resounding thuds as her cry of anguish reverberated throughout the sanctuary. Dark red blood gushed from her head. Francesca's body lay limp and still. Eternal Father, lift me to your waiting arms. Assateague Island. Crossing the bridge to Assateague Island National Seashore took them to another world. Of these 4 students from Salisbury University, Brett and Molly were the wildlife enthusiasts, so spending time on Assateague was their idea of a perfect day. David and Francesca came along for the adventure. Assateague Island is a blend of oceanfront beaches, marshes, and freshwater ponds, all in their national state, with no boardwalks, hotels, or restaurants. "Well, this is wild America," exclaimed David, looking at the expanse of natural beauty. "How come I've never been here before? It's just minutes away from Ocean City, yet so different." Brett drove his Jeep to the sand dunes near the beach. They set up camp with a tent and coolers of food and drinks. It was the last Saturday in April, and sunny, but not yet warm enough for swimming in the ocean. First, they had lunch. Then they were ready to go exploring. There's lots of wildlife here, but the most notorious inhabitants are horses, living in the wild, Brett said. They've been here for hundreds of years. They frolic in the ocean and roam the marshes. The rules are, don't feed the horses. and stay at least 40 feet away from them. I go horseback riding, so I'm not afraid of horses, said David. These are wild horses, Brett said. They'll bite or kick if you get too close. The stallions are especially aggressive. Let's walk along the beach, said Miley. Then we'll go over the dunes where a trail leads to inland ponds. Maybe we'll find some horses there. Why are horses living on Assateague? Asked David. Did Indian tribes leave them here? They were released by 17th century colonists to evade paying taxes on their livestock. Or, folklore claims, horses survived from Spanish galleons wrecked off the Virginia coast, said Molly. Either way, these horses are sturdy stock to survive here. The beach at Assateague is a wide strip of soft white sand, as far as the eye can see. Every day the mood of the ocean is different. Today, tall waves topped with whitecaps rolled on shore, with light sparkling on the water. As they strolled along the beach, Molly and Francesca looked for seashells gathering in the eddies. Long tongues of frigid water licked their feet. When they were out of earshot of the guys, Molly asked, "Well, what do you think?" "Think about what?" Francesca responded. "Think about David. Do you like him?" "We've only been on one date. He went to Longwood Gardens with me and my family last Sunday. He seems nice enough," Francesca replied. "No, I mean, do you really like him? You know, most girls on campus would give anything to be dating David." "Oh, so you're saying the big man on campus is interested in me, and I'm so wrapped up in my world of dance, I don't even appreciate it." Molly laughed. "Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. Most students on campus think he's hot stuff, and you're so ho-hum." "Well, I'm not going to wave palm branches when he walks by," said Francesca as she laughed out her own joke. "But I admit, David was absolutely charming when we went to Longwood Gardens. He was really curious about all the exhibits, and he made a real effort to talk with my little cousins. He told them silly jokes, and he seemed to fit right in with them." Scintillating stuff," joked Molly. They glanced over at the guys who were walking near the dunes just to make sure they were still out of earshot. David heard the whinny from a horse coming from beyond the dunes. He sprinted down a trail between the dunes and saw a large brown stallion grazing on the grasses. The horse sensed David's movements, stopped grazing, raised his head, and gazed directly at him. "Hey there, big boy," David spoke quietly while stepping toward the horse, who was about a half a football field away. The horse snorted and stomped the ground. His ears went back, and he bared his teeth. "It's okay, big guy," David said. The horse stiffened. David held out his hand to the horse. When the horse leapt into a full gallop, David realized he was about to be attacked. He dove into a large stand of shrubs and pine trees and scrambled under cover, hoping to confuse the animal as to his whereabouts. "Yaw-haw!" shouted Brett, racing down the trail, holding his jacket overhead and snapping it in the air. He raised his arms high, continuing to flap his jacket and yell at the horse, which turned and ran toward the inland swamp. When he was sure his attacker was gone, David called out, "You saved my butt." "Dude, I told you to leave the horses alone," Brett admonished with a hearty laugh. "I'm glad you followed me," David said. "That bad boy came charging after me, and I didn't even get that close to him." "Oh, I knew I had to keep you out of trouble." David picked his way through the thicket while brushing leaves and dirt from his clothes. "What's all the kerfuffle about?" called Molly as she jogged down the trail. "The urban cowboy just needed a little help dealing with the wildlife," Brett said. "Are you okay?" Francesca asked as she made her way toward David. "Just put in my place by an island stallion," David complained. "Damn horse had the social graces of a wild boar. I got some scrapes and cuts, but it's mainly my ego that's bruised. A day of trekking around the island brought sightings of other wildlife. Brett and Molly served as tour guides, explaining the wonders of this pristine barrier island. The afternoon ended as they returned to the beach. They were greeted by the roaring crash of waves and a stiff breeze. A gathering storm forced the group to return to Brett's Jeep for the drive home. "I had a terrific day. How about you?" said David. "Fabulous day," said Francesca as she and David climbed into the back seat of the Jeep. She leaned toward David and put her head on his shoulder. She gazed down at his bare legs, which were hairy and red from the sun. "Ooh, there's a bug on your knee," Francesca exclaimed. "It's a tick, and there's another one on your calf. Brett, turn into the visitor center so we can take them off." Brett turned into the parking lot and stopped the car. David hopped out, and Francesca was right behind him. She grabbed a towel and wiped his legs front and back. 3 ticks were attached. David pulled 2 out of his calf, and Brett removed a tick from David's knee. They threw the ticks on the hot pavement and crushed them. "I don't see any more ticks," said Francesca as she examined David's legs front and back. "Maybe you got them when you dove into the brush to get away from that stallion." "Be sure to check your whole body for ticks when you get home," Molly advised. "Ticks carry diseases that can make you really sick, like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and Lyme disease and lots of other bad stuff." "Francesca, I'll check your body for ticks," David offered. "You were in the underbrush, too." "I don't have ticks. You have ticks," said Francesca. "I see ticks on you right now," said David, and pretended to take ticks off her neck and knees, but playfully tickled her instead. The mirror. As she drove down the driveway to their home, Francesca felt exhausted. She and David had worked hard to build this home near the tiny village of Waterview, where the Nanticoke River, the Wicomico River dump into Fishing Bay, and then the Chesapeake Bay. The bay side of Delmarva is magical. Spectacular sunsets and ever-changing seas, sometimes with crashing waves, or often glassy, calm waters. Coming home was always uplifting as she observed the temper of the waterways. Except this evening, her mood was dark as she noticed David's truck was not in the driveway. Ominous storm clouds were gathering in the western sky, and a magnificent sunset was in the making. So she walked out on the pier to watch brilliant colors create splendor in the sky. She sat, alone, on a wooden bench at the end of the pier, taking in the vivid reds and fuchsia, mirrored in the glassy, calm sea, occasionally glancing over her shoulder to see if David had arrived. She was lost in thought as the sunset passed, and darkness fell over the bay. There was just enough light from the driveway lamp to see her way back to their house. Her mind was racing over events, both recent and from years ago, as she brooded over what had gone wrong with their marriage. She had once loved David with all her heart, but her recurring bouts of Lyme disease had made life an unrelenting struggle. He had lost all patience with her poor health. She became aware of signs that he was having an affair, which culminated last night when he didn't come home after work. There had been meetings that went much later than his office hours. Francesca had confronted him about having an affair, which he denied. This afternoon, a private eye gave Francesca his report. It looked like all David's possessions were still in the house, so she'd hoped he would come home tonight. Then faint sounds of a truck coming up the drive. The front door swung open, and David walked in, made eye contact, and brushed past her without saying a word. "Where have you been?" Francesca asked. "Why do you want to know?" David replied. "Because I'm your wife. You have been lying to me. I know you're having an affair, and I know who she is. I'm home, that's all you need to know. Do you think you can just walk in and out of my life? This is my house, too. I can come and go as I wish. What about our vows to care for each other?" "I'm so done caring for you," he shouted, his voice hoarse with anger. "I'm exhausted by you being sick all the time. Every time I think you're getting well, you get sick again. Do you think I like getting sick? I've tried to be the best wife I can, and you repay me with screwing around with another woman. How can you just walk in here with no apology?" "I haven't been well either," David retorted. "You're not the only one who's been struggling. I deserve to have some fun in life, and you're certainly no fun." "Fun? I admit that life hasn't been much fun. Can you just tell me what you're planning for our future?" "I want you to tell that other woman that that affair is over." David clenched his jaw and said nothing. He bounded up the stairs, got 2 large suitcases, and took them to the master bedroom. She followed him into the bedroom and watched in disbelief as he flung them open, grabbed clothes, and jammed the clothes into the suitcases. He slammed the suitcases closed and stomped out the front door, threw the suitcases in his truck, and drove away, leaving Francesca stunned and speechless. She stepped into the living room and sat in the first chair she came to. She was in shock. She sat there with thoughts swimming through her mind, like goldfish swimming in a pool. They raced by, but she couldn't catch them. Francesca was home alone to deal with the realization that life as she had known it was over. She was struggling to get back her health, and now her marriage was over. She lost track of time, but finally realized she was utterly exhausted and should go to bed. Not wanting to sleep in the master bed, she went to the guest bedroom and wrapped herself in an antique comforter. She pushed off her shoes, but stayed in her clothes. She felt feverish and had a headache. She had been weeping tears of despair, but fell into a restless sleep. The night wore on with one nightmare after another. Storms blew in from the western sky, with winds screaming, waves crashing against the bulkhead. The sound of hard rain pounding on the roof woke her, mid-dream, sobbing from some grotesque nightmare. Francesca sat up in bed, tried to calm herself, then stumbled to the bathroom. The dim nightlight in the bathroom was just bright enough for her to see the way. She leaned down to splash handfuls of cold water on her face. Still sobbing, she rose to look at her face in the bathroom mirror, expecting to see it red and bloated. But she was not prepared for the horror looking back at her from the mirror. Her face was contorted into such a twisted vision of agony that she hardly recognized herself. Immediately over her reflection, strangely illuminated, there appeared another face, the sneering, mocking reflection of evil. The vision of a demon rejoicing in her distress, his peals of derisive laughter reverberating around the small room with jarring intensity. Francesca screamed, ran down the hallway, flung open the front door, and vanished into the storm. She slipped in the mud, her whole body covered in wet sand and dirt. When she was aware of her surroundings, she was out on the pier, curled up in a ball on the wooden bench, still sobbing and clutching her pillow to her chest. The driving rain and spray from waves crashing against the pier soaked her to the skin. Through howling winds, she became aware of another presence, breathing right beside her, his hot breath against her cheek. Gathering her courage, she opened her eyes to see what demons he now faced. And there he was, Baron, the neighbor's German Shepherd dog. Francesca reached out to hug the furry, friendly monster. He was soaking wet, but just the companion she needed to bring her back to a safer place. Through pain and illness, Francesca must find wellness and the woman she once was. So she did not surrender. Francesca joined the Lyme Wars to fight for the rights of patients with tick-borne diseases. In the words of Dr. Kenneth Ligner, Lyme literate doctor from New York, in the fullness of time, the mainstream handling of chronic Lyme disease will be viewed as one of the most shameful episodes in the history of medicine, because elements of academic medicine, elements of the government, and virtually the entire insurance industry have colluded to deny a disease.
This has been a You Can See production.